It is 3 o'clock, and I will call the meeting of the zoning administrator for the city of San Clemente to order on this Thursday, February 22nd, 2024 at 3 p.m. My name is Adam Atamian. I will be serving as the zoning administrator for this meeting. The first item on our agenda is to receive and file the minutes from the February 8th, 2024 zoning administrator meeting. I reviewed those minutes and I provided some mostly grammatical corrections to Ms. Tatich, and I see that those corrections were made and posted online as well. So with that, I will receive and file those minutes. This next item is oral and written communication. Members of the audience may address the zoning administrator on any item within the jurisdiction of the zoning administrator that is not on the zoning administrator agenda. If you wish to speak, please speak up, and if you desire, state your name and or city of residence for the record and make your presentation. Please limit your presentation to 3 minutes. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda today? Seeing nobody, we will move on. We've got 3 public hearing items listed on the agenda. The public hearing process includes a staff presentation, a presentation by the applicant not to exceed 10 minutes, and public testimony not to exceed 3 minutes per speaker. Following closure of the public hearing, the zoning administrator will respond to questions raised during the hearing, discuss the issues, and act upon the matter by motion. The first item is public hearing project 23-411, Sunset Shores facade remodel at 410 Corto Lane. I see in the agenda that staff is recommending that the zoning administrator continue the hearing for 2 reasons. The first being that the envelopes required to provide written notice to nearby property owners and residents were not received in time. And additionally, the applicant is considering minor design revisions suggested by the Design Review Subcommittee and planning staff. Based on that, we will continue the hearing to a date uncertain as it needs to be noticed.
It's noticed for the next CA meeting.
Is a new notice being published in the San Clemente Times?
Yes.
We are mailing it all out, and we'll repost notices on the property as well.
He has reposted on the property. We have not mailed, but we did do SC Times.
Okay, so since all of the noticing will be done for whatever meeting it's at, I don't need to continue it to a date certain since all of that noticing will be done appropriately for that meeting, so I'm just going to continue that item. That brings us to item B on public hearings. That's public hearing permit 23-437, Mason Residence Addition at 235 Avenida Miramar. Staff planner is David Carrillo. Mr. Carrillo.
Yes, thank you. And I have the applicants here joining us today. Michael, Tiffany, and Matt. Yeah, Tiffany and Matt are the property owners. So this is a request for a minor cultural heritage permit and a minor exception permit. This is at a historic property that is developed with a single-family home and a detached rear garage. Reasons why it was listed as a historic resource is due to its association with Virgil Westbrook, a prominent architect in San Clemente that worked on many historic buildings, and also for its association with the Spanish colonial revival architectural style. We have more data provided in attachment 3 as far as the historical information on that property. So the project, it is a 499 square foot 2-story rear addition to the existing residence, not attached to the rear garage. Part of the project, it includes a request for the continuation of an existing legal non-conforming east side yard setback of 3 feet 1 inch, where 5 feet is required per code. And this would allow the addition to be constructed to that 3 foot 1 inch and follow the same setback as the existing home. If we look at the plans provided as an attachment, there is already a jog, so there'll be from the original to the new addition. It won't be a continuous line. You'll see a jog before it goes back out to the 3 foot 1 inch. So this requires zoning administrator approval, given that it's an addition that's less than 500 square feet. And also the minor exception permit requires approval for the zoning administrator, from the zoning administrator, to continue a legal non-conforming setback. Part of the process is to go before the Cultural Heritage Subcommittee. This project did go before the subcommittee back in December of last year, where we did get feedback. Overall, there was support of the project in reviewing it against the Secretary of Interior standards. There is an analysis provided as part of the packet that the applicant submitted. The staff is in agreement with. One comment that we did get from the subcommittee was that more justification be provided in the staff report regarding the minor exception permit requests for the reduction of the setback. That has been provided in attachment attachment 6. And one thing to note from that attachment is the two reasons. One reason for the request is to accommodate modern living spaces, to allow the addition to meet the 5-foot distance requirement between the detached garage and the primary home. And also, as far as the part of the Spanish colonial revival architecture, right? One of those elements is having courtyards and open spaces as that style, and providing the setback or meeting the setback would reduce the enjoyable open space at the rear. So that's one of the reasons why the applicants decided to continue with this request to keep it at the 3-foot 1 inch. So overall, staff is supportive of the project. The rear 2-story addition adds articulation to the existing home by being behind the existing residence. There are varied recessed planes throughout the addition and overall project. The project does provide compatible windows, doors, exterior light fixtures, wrought iron grills, and other similar features. The project will maintain a front yard setback of the property with landscaping, a low garden wall, a paved walkway, and a long driveway compatible with other residential properties within the neighborhood with similar characteristics. Again, the project has been deemed consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. And the project does not preclude the subject property or neighboring properties from being used as residences as intended by the subject zone. So, per that report, staff is recommending that the zoning administrator determine the project is categorically exempt from CEQA and adopt resolution ZA 24-004, subject to the attached conditions of approval. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Carrillo. Would the applicant or their team like to make a presentation?
Sure, I'll start off. My name is Michael Luna. I'm the architect for the project, and indeed I'm here with the Masons, Matt and Tiffany. And Matt and Tiffany and I have been working together quite diligently for some time. Once again, we've got a posted stamp lot, 40 by 100, one of our standard lots, and with that small size lot come a lot of constraints. We've worked really hard with staff over this time period to come up with something that hopefully will be palatable. And I think indeed we have, because there's a few things that have really, I think, made it easily approvable by the Secretary of Interior standards. First of all, we located the addition in the very rear portion of the property. And we have absolutely minimized any impact to the existing resource by where we sensitively, I think, very carefully placed the new square footage. Part of the constraints back here that we have to work with if we've got an existing garage, zoning code says we have to stay 5 feet away from that accessory structure by code. So there's that constraint. There's the Secretary of Interior Standards constraint to that, that says, okay, well, maybe you can do something in the back of this property. And so we've indeed placed a square footage there. But the house is it's a very tiny house. They have children. The house as it sits is kind of a 1.5 bedroom. It's really a 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and this kind of open study that's just off the living room. They need bedrooms. So we've tried to locate this bedroom upstairs on the second floor, squeezing it in between, again, in the rear part of the project, trying to save a yard, some outdoor living space in terms of the depth of the lot, and on the width, again, constrained by the accessory structure and the property line on the left. And so our decision to continue in the existing setback is really a result of all of the constraints that we have to deal with. We feel that there's really no difference between having a 3-foot setback and a 5-foot setback, or even a 4-foot setback, in terms of any potential impact to the neighbor. The neighbor has a driveway on that side and a 1-car garage. There is no outdoor formal living area out there. And so, again, whether it moved from here to here, it makes virtually no impact in terms of sunlight. And when you look at the portion of this second story, it's really a small second story. This whole, we're able to finally now get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, actually, 2-bath home, and get a workable kitchen and someplace to put a dining table. We've really been able to make a real big difference for this house with just a 500 square foot addition. With that, I'd like to turn over my remaining time to Tiffany and or Matt, if you'd like to expand.
My name is Tiffany Mason Lopez, and we've owned this home for over 7 years. It was the only home that we saw in San Clemente, and we immediately fell in love with it and were able to get it. And we very much cherish the spirit of the house and wanted to maintain that. We also have an 18-year history in historic preservation and redoing another house that we worked on. And so we know that, these little houses can be a real challenge and they pose all sorts of problems. But the very first thing that we ever did when we had our previous house was we consulted a historic preservationist. We didn't touch a thing until we did that. And so we've done a lot of educating ourselves about the Spanish colonial revival, language, really. And we've done a communication since even prior to Jonathan Lightfoot, talking with the city about what are the expectations, what does the city require for the respect of this type of a historic resource, and what are the expectations of us, being the caregivers of such a property in such an important place. And we realize it's not the biggest place in San Clemente, but all of these historic resources that are left are important. And so we want to be very, very delicate with how we treat such an important historic resource, but also revitalize it so that it doesn't continue to change hands. Every time it changes hands, it's had 14 different owners. And every time it changes hands, there's a risk of someone, painting over the vintage tiles that are really precious inside the house, or someone knocking down a wall without asking permission, or someone not listening very closely to staff about, what are the interior secretary guidelines on how you should treat something like this with regard to revitalization. And so we really felt like we didn't want to go with the approach of let's maximize on our investment and go for square footage. Let's have this little bungalow still look like a little bungalow, maintain the spirit that it has, but also be able to turn it into a legacy. We are not house flippers. We probably, unfortunately for us, are a little bit sentimental about the homes that we have had and worked on. And so what we wanted to do was get just enough square footage so that we can, not have to move our dining table into the kitchen to have a dinner with each other, to be able to have our boys, have their own bedrooms if we need to for a period of time, and also have what we feel is a very respectful impact on this property. We also very much, I think, are enamored by the ideas that Ole Hansen had about the outdoor enjoyment, about the blossoms in our city. And so we wanted to take the outdoor spaces that would be taken by this addition and replicate and beautify them in other spaces. So if you look at the plan, if you walk through it, you can see that every indoor space is really balanced by an outdoor space that's going to be beautified. And we just hope that, that whole pattern of people probably buying this house and then after a few years realizing that although it's darling, it's not very functional, we want to change that script and say, this is a house that's very functional. It's a historic resource for the city. It should be beautified and maintained in perpetuity. So that's kind of where we were at with our approach. Minimize the impact while just gaining what we need for the functional, modern aspect of living.
Well, thank you.
And just in closing, I would request an opportunity for rebuttal if necessary.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Mason, you're good? All right. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this item?
Yeah. Larry Culbertson. I'm here representing just myself, no Historical Society or any other group. I wanted to see what this project was going to look like, and the only rendering that I could find was not, for some reason, the front rendering was not colored, but I wanted to just position that next to what's there now, so I had to get that to Mr. Kenyon, please. So I've written down just a few words. I've read the staff report, and I understand that a tremendous amount of work went in on the part of Mr. Luna, the Masons, and a great report on the part of David. The addition, but I'm still concerned about the effect that it's going to have on the historic integrity of the property. The addition would be pushed way back in the front of the building. I understand that. It would only be 499 feet. It's a very modest addition. Nevertheless, there's a possibility that the project might have some negative effect on the property's historic integrity. The concern is based on the fact that one of the primary character-defining features listed in the DPR form and in the report is that that was the Cultural Heritage Subcommittee report, is that, quote, one-story nature of the primary residence. The project would alter that classic look of the house, and not necessarily for the better. Does this house qualify for the National Register of Historic Places? I think it's an important question. Today's staff report briefly mentioned the fact that the house is on the city's list of designated historic resources for its association with the prominent local architect Virgil Westbrook. So the house was more than just associated with Westbrook. He presumably designed it, had it built, and he lived there from 1927 to 1936.
Hold on one second, Larry. That needs to be cracked open a little bit, just because it's a public
okay,
meeting. No, but every time we have these meetings, I think we need a sign that's somebody one of those golf signs that says "Quiet Place." Please, Mr. Culbertson.
As I say, it was more than just associated with Westbrook. He actually apparently designed it, built it, had his family live there for 10 years. Westbrook was credited as far as how important Westbrook was to the city. He's credited with designing 31 buildings in San Clemente, including the St. Clemens Episcopal Church, the Moulton House, the Swigert House, Seacliff Villa, the Easley Building, and the Ole Hansen Beach Club. 2 of those are on the National Register. So he's exceedingly important in the history of San Clemente. When you consider how important Westbrook was to early San Clemente history, his close association with Ole Hansen, and the fact that he lived here for 10 years, you can see how extremely important it is to our history. I believe that a case can be made that the home does qualify for listing with the National Register. So it would have been good to get a preservation expert's opinion on whether or not this was going to affect the historic integrity. So I would like to receive assurance from the zoning administrator that this project will not reduce the integrity of the property to a level that would preclude it from being listed on the National Register. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Lars Krogus, and I live up the street from Masons, and I'd like to say I firmly feel that I just have, in the process of adding an ADU to my historic building, went through a year's worth of back and forth with the city, with the planning commission, etc. I believe that the city needs to take a much more open look to people like myself, like the Masons, that are spending hard-earned money on homes that are of historic nature. My home was built in 1926. And really look at today's modern family and say, a modern family cannot live in a house that was a beach house, basically, back in the 20s. And if they're willing to do whatever it takes to keep that home looking the same and preserving it for the next 100 years, we as a city should be saying, yeah, we need you to do that. Because if you don't, the termites will eat it, which some people have said they would like to see that happen and some of these houses fall down, including the statement made about my house. And I think that that's wrong. I spent hard-earned money on restoring my 1926 Ole Hansen house, which was about to fall down. And I think that other families that want to buy these homes and keep them as a monument to San Clemente should be rewarded. Shouldn't have to listen to randoms that say, well, I don't like it, so I'm going to complain. And I think that that's what's happening in this town. Nobody is actually saying to people, wow, thank you very much for doing this, because you are preserving a chunk of San Clemente. And that's what I want to hear from the city, and that's what I want to hear from people on the planning commission. I want to hear them saying, thank you. I spent $350,000 on the inside of my house because it was completely falling apart. And now it's going to last for 100 years. It's going to be a monument to the city of San Clemente when they tear down other buildings. That's what I want to see. And I believe that they're doing that for that home. And I walk by that home all the time. And that's where I think the city needs to really think about where the priorities are. And I appreciate the hard work that David did with me over the last year, and I really hope that they move forward with this project.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public that would like to speak on this item? Okay. All right. Well, there's a number of things that have been brought up. So I've got a couple questions for staff. This house is part of a Mills Act. Do we know what the history of the Mills Act was? How long ago that agreement was put in place?
Let's see. I think I have it here. I don't know from the top of my head, but
Was this?
I think
Did
it
you?
was 20. I think we.
Was
did
this
it
a
in 2021.
project that you?
so
You were the.
We did. Yes, we
the
started.
requesters of
Yeah,
that.
we started it
Okay.
with Jonathan Lightfoot. He did most of the development and the consultation, and David Carrillo was there too when the consultant came out to evaluate our home. What happened was it was approved, but we then the
you guys held off. It
we
came
had
back
a
in
death in the
2021.
family, and then the pandemic hit, and so it wasn't until we came back and said, hey, is this still approved? Can we actually get it enacted? And so then we went back to city council and had it. Do you know the date that?
Yeah, 2021.
2021.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. A member of the public brought up the possibility of this being eligible for the National Historic Register. Has that been looked into?
Yeah, so we do have a DPR survey that mentions it has a potential to be part of a national registered district. So that's not as an individual property, but as part of a district. That's the only mention of a national listing as part of a group of properties.
And does inclusion in the National Historic Register require the property owner's consent?
It does not. In this case, it's up to the city and the public if there's interest to include them. They would be included.
Okay. So I'll start with the design. There's two issues here before the zoning administrator. One is the architecture and the design of the addition of to a historic home. The other one is a minor exception permit. So we'll start with the addition. I'm familiar with Michael Luna's work, very familiar with it. We've worked on a number of projects in the past. And I will say for the record, I did visit the site and looked at the context of this property as compared with the surrounding properties. I think the design is a very tasteful addition. I think the staff support and justification for staff's support of the design is very clear. It makes a lot of sense. One thing I would like to have for the record is the minutes of the Cultural Heritage Subcommittee indicates that they were supportive of the project moving to the zoning administrator meeting. Can you summarize what their discussion was as relates to the architectural treatment of this addition?
Yeah, I was not at that meeting, so I don't know if Michael, you want to speak to that.
I've read some of the comments, but
Yeah.
I'm basically
What I gathered from meeting with Jonathan and having a post meeting with the applicants that they were in support of the addition and deeming it consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. Again, their main comment was that further justification be provided for the setback reduction request.
Okay, thank you. And I do see, I did review the letter that you provided about the justification for that encroachment. So this is, while potentially eligible for the National Historic Register, it's not currently, and I don't really see it's not really it's the city's past practice to include private residences on that National Historic Register. While we do have a few residences that are part of that, eligibility for it I don't think is a reason that we would want to preclude somebody from adding on to a historic property. Another member of the public, and I am familiar with your project as well, I think made a very valid concern that raised a very valid point that ultimately this is a representation of investment in this property, and that is a good thing. Well, you do have a Mills Act, and that does provide some property tax relief. The fundamental goal of the Mills Act property is to maintain the historic properties, and part of maintaining historic properties is that additions are not going to be substantially detrimental to the historic nature of those properties. And I do appreciate the applicants indicating that they have educated themselves on the Secretary of the Interior standards. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for the work that you want to put into this home. As far as the addition goes, I agree that if you're going to add on to this property, the rear of the property makes a lot of sense. And while I think two-story additions need to be reviewed with a higher level of scrutiny, when I visited the site, and it's Mr. Culbertson, I thank you for providing this picture. When I reviewed the site, the sidewalk looks to be about I'll say about 4 feet below the level of the threshold of the front of the house. It's a narrow street, and one of the issues that and this is just a fundamental problem with elevations, is that they provide a perspective that is never actually realized on the site. And so this picture you cannot see the top of the roof. You see the eave, but you don't see the top of the roof. And if we look at the side elevation, which in this case is beneficial, if you cannot see the top of the roof at the front, it is very unlikely that standing in the front, you're going to see the actual addition. You might see it from across the street, but it's really like one property, and it's private property that is, and I can see that if you're driving down the street in a vehicle, you'll see the top of it. But I think that this home is really well situated and already constructed in such a way that there is a clear differentiation between the existing structure and the addition. So, reviewing the plans, I think the design of the structure is very contemplative of the existing residents and respectful of that. And so, as far as the request for let's see, I want to make sure I get this right. Minor cultural heritage permit 23-129. I don't see any issues with the addition as far as the design goes. With that said, the minor exception permit is the one facet of this project that it does give me some cause for concern, and I do appreciate the additional justification that you provided. And I'd kind of like to talk through this. I think that the last half of the letter provides a good roadmap to discuss this issue and I'll say find some alternatives to avoid a minor exception. While the neighbor's property is a driveway and it is, I'll say, an open space area of the property, just because they have not developed something there doesn't mean that they don't have property rights to do it in the future. And so I want to avoid a first come, first served mentality when it comes to the use of space. I understand that there are significant space limitations of this property, especially in the back, and I understand the concern about wanting to maintain as much rear yard as possible. But there's a few things that I think are at issue here. The first is that the request is for a continuation of an encroachment. While there is a portion of the residence that encroaches to the same degree that this portion, that this addition proposes to, that encroachment is not technically being continued. It's being utilized, but it's not a continuation. Nor do we want a continuation. And I understand that the desire to step it out to further differentiate it from the original residence. But complying with the side setback would also provide an additional step that would create that differentiation. The first item listed as far as the justifications in the second half of the applicant's letter indicates that modifying the current design to conform to a modern setback renders the study room useless as a bedroom by not allowing space for modern-sized bedroom furniture. That I understand. The study, I'm assuming, since it's the room that's identified as the study, is the second floor room. I think one of the issues here is that there's a 5-foot distance requirement, which is the second item listed, that there's a 5-foot distance requirement between buildings. I spoke with the building official today and got some clarification on exactly what the building code allows. But for clarifications, for the purpose of clarification, this is going to be sprinklered, correct?
The new building.
The existing is not.
The existing is not, but I
Yes,
believe
but by
that
code, anytime you add a second story at all, that triggers the sprinklers.
Okay.
So it will be sprinklered.
Okay, so because it's going to be sprinklered and because it's going to be entirely enclosed, the first story needs a 5-foot separation. But the second story, I think there's some alternate means and methods available in the code, and I got clarification from the building official today that would allow the second story to be moved in. And so I don't see the need for the second story to encroach into the setback because there's some wiggle room that you can adjust the second story on. It might create an overhang, however, that's really only going to be viewable from the internal portion of your property. And so there's an avenue to provide the space that you're looking for without a second story encroachment. Stepping buildings back is, and having two wall planes is relatively costly, and so it's going to be in the best interest of your project to simply keep one plane. While that would require you to potentially take up a little bit more of the rear yard, that's just kind of one of the limitations of these types of properties. It's not a perfect universe of opportunities when you're working with these types of properties, and the Mills Act is designed to maintain properties, historic properties, to the extent that they can be maintained. I think that losing a little bit more of the rear yard to accommodate that extra space of the first floor is not unreasonable. Ultimately, the minor exception permit process is to facilitate the reasonable enjoyment of property. This is already a relatively constricted lot. It's and structure. You've already got a Mills Act that basically says you're going to maintain what you've got. For the reasonable enjoyment of property, I don't see that encroachment as being necessary, and I'm not going to be able to make that finding. So with that, I will make the decision to approve the minor cultural heritage permit, but not the minor exception permit. This decision will be appealable by and to the city council. So if this is a deal breaker, you have additional remedies to continue making this request. So with that, I will move to determine the project is categorically exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15301 and 15331, and adopt resolution ZA 24-004 approving minor cultural heritage permit 23-129, but denying the request for minor exception permit 23-436 for the reasons that I just stated. And staff will need to revise that resolution to reflect denial of that permit and that the zoning administrator was not able to make those findings. And like I said, there's a 10-day appeal period for the public, but the decision is appealable to and by the city council. So you do have some additional remedies in the future. So that is that for that item. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your investment.
Thank you. I have one more item, so I can see you guys after. Do you want to stick around, or we can jump on a call later?
Yeah, yeah, would like to chat. Okay. We'll stick around.
Okay.
Hello?
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Give me a call.
Are you Mr. Parsons?
That's me.
All right. All right, the next item on the agenda is public hearing for minor cultural heritage permit. Follow the agenda, sorry. Public hearing permit 23-437, Mason Residence Edition, 235 Avenida Miramar. David Creo is our staff planner. Mr. Creo.
Yes, good afternoon. And as you acknowledged, we have the property owner, Paul Parsons, joining us today. So this is a similar request as a previous one. It's for a minor cultural heritage permit and a minor exception permit. The project is for a rear attached one-story addition to accommodate a 175 square foot bathroom. Again at the rear, and then in conjunction with a reduced rear yard setback of 4 feet where 5 feet is required. So some brief background on the property. It's a single family residence that was constructed in 1929. It does have a detached garage as well, but this one will be at the front of the property as opposed to the rear. And reasons for its listing are similar, again, as the previous one, for its association with Virgil Westbrook and the architectural style of Spanish colonial revival. This project was not referred to the Cultural Heritage Subcommittee compared to the last one, given the nature of this project. It's a lot more minor, again, in nature. It's located at the rear, not visible from the street, and it's staying one story. Staff is supportive of the request, both from the design standpoint. The project shows compatible building materials as two-piece clay tile roofs, wood windows, and white stucco. And again, it follows the same style as the primary home. The reduced setback, again, that is happening at the rear. And we did review the encroachments section of the code. There is no limitation or restriction for these types of reductions. The code talks about limiting the amount of encroachments into setbacks for architectural projections that are listed on a specific table, like items like roof eaves and chimneys, bay windows, etc. There is an exception where the city planner has the discretion to allow more encroachments into the setbacks for those types of elements. So that part of the code wouldn't apply as far as how many encroachments are allowed into the rear yard setback. So again, staff is supportive. Given the analysis in the staff report, the project maintains the front yard of the property with landscaping compatible with other residential properties with similar site characteristics. The staff deems the project consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. Again, the project is a one-story addition at the rear of the residence with a compliant side yard setback of over 5 feet. The reduced rear setback of 4 feet is compatible with the development in the neighborhood, which includes some development up to legal non-conforming rear yard setbacks. The addition is mostly screened from neighboring properties and does not overlook onto other lots, as the project is one story. The project accommodates additional living area while maintaining a front yard with outdoor deck and open space, consistent with design guidelines, which encourage designs to be done in a manner that take advantage of outdoor living spaces. And now we'll add to that there was some revisions done from the applicant on the rear roof design to keep the main ridge line at the rear in its place, to help tell a story of between the old and the new when you're at the property. So that's something that the applicant was open to per staff's direction. So staff recommends that the zoning administrator determine the project is categorically exempt from CEQA and adopt resolution ZA 24-003, subject to the attached conditions of approval. And that concludes my presentation.
Excellent, thank you, Mr. Carrillo. Would the applicant like to make a
Sure.
statement?
Yeah, sure. Paul Parsons, and we recently have the house on the Mills Act.
Mhm.
We were approved, was it January?
Yeah, last December.
Yeah, December.
Yeah.
And so that was exciting. I'm a member of the Historical Society and know Larry. Larry's actually gone through the house, and we've spent several $100,000 fixing it up. It was a very rundown, neglected home, and my wife and I fell in love with it and love the city of San Clemente and continue to be involved. You may see more of me on the Planning Commission and Design Review Board. I'm looking to get involved and apply this because I really love this city and want to be more involved. So our idea here is to just be able to utilize the space long term as we get older, and having 2 bathrooms will help that. Are you married, or do you have somebody in
I've
your
gone
life?
down that road.
The reason I ask is if you're married with a partner, then it's certainly nice to have 2 baths.
I understand that need, yes.
So that's where we're coming from, and we the house is actually in the middle of a bunch of apartments that frankly were not mindful of the historic asset that was in their midst, and I feel like we've done a lot to help not only maintain it but beautify that asset to make it even a better version of what that was meant in that environment. And unfortunately, because it's all like this, you don't really get to see all sides of it. But because of that, it makes this addition not visible at all, basically, for anybody, except for from the inside of the house and walking around the yard.
Excellent, thank you. All right, I'll open this up to public comments.
Yes, Larry Culbertson again speaking for myself. I live right down the street, a 5-minute walk away from Mr. Parsons' property. Drive by there frequently. Had the opportunity to look into the place. You want me to be louder?
Yes.
All right, I'll talk louder.
You don't have this one written down for me.
Okay. I had the opportunity to go through the property when it was for sale, and as Mr. Parsons says, it was a wreck. It'd been a rental for a long time, and we considered buying it, and I didn't want to tackle that big a project. So kudos to him for being willing to do that. I've been through it subsequently. He's done a lot of great work. It's really looking spectacular. The property is extremely challenged. If you visited the site or look at the drawings, you'll see that there's a lot of yard. It's basically all the way at the back of the property. So the only way you're going to do an addition there is up or excavate just a tiny little bit of property on the back. So I would encourage you to allow him that little bit of leeway to extend into the setback.
Excellent, thank you for your comments. Okay, well, I also visited the site, and Yeah, it's a beautiful home, beautiful lot. There's a nice slope in the front. Even the garage is pretty cute. But as far as visibility behind, there's absolutely nothing that you can see. Thank you, Mr. Carrillo, for clarifying the setback requirements. I wanted to make sure that the request was within the zoning administrator's authority to approve. I have reviewed the staff report and the attachments. And so looking at this site, it is quite constrained in your ability to add on to it. Having reviewed the plans, this is a very modest addition. While it will remove basically any backyard that you have, I have to say, just looking at the site plan, that I don't know that it was really ever much of a yard. It certainly doesn't have enough usable space to be anything more than a patio, and you've got quite a bit of space in the front, which I think is nice. And I saw that there's a seating area up there, so that's kind of your open space area. The street is heavily developed, I'll say, driving in that area. This home is quite dwarfed by its neighboring properties. So I see this as an absolutely reasonable request. And I'll thank you for not adding on to the front of the building, because that would be your other primary option, which would have a detrimental effect to the historic nature of the home. For the reasons listed in the proposed resolution, the findings can easily be made for this project regarding the architectural treatment of the project and the general appearance is in keeping with the historic nature of the home, but does not alter the view of that historic resource from the public. And I do thank you for the investment that you're making in this property. So the findings for the minor cultural heritage permit can be met because of those findings, and also the findings for the minor exception permit can be met for the reasons listed in the staff report as well. So with that, I will move to determine the project is categorically exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15301 and 15331, and adopt resolution ZA 24-003 approving minor cultural heritage permit 23-362 and minor exception permit 23-048 for the Parsons Residence addition, subject to the attached conditions. Please keep in mind that there is a 10-day public appeal period, and that this decision is appealable by and to the City Council. So with that, I will continue through our agenda to cover. We have no new business, we have no old business, and so I will adjourn this meeting to the next regular meeting of the zoning administrator to be held at 3 p.m. on Thursday, March 7th, 2024 at the Community Development Department, first floor community